This podcast is brought to you by Versed. Guys wear that guys wear. This fantasy football draft season, Verse Limitless Pants should be at the top of every guy's watch list. Because while some guys are sweating whether to risk it all on an up-and-coming rookie, fall back on a trusted vet, or to just ride with whatever the auto draft tosses at them, gearing up with the Limitless Collection's versatility, comfort, and style is always a sure thing. Versed. Guys wear that guys wear. Only at Dick's.
Cash rules everything around me. When that line dropped, it changed the whole hustle. Introducing the Sprite Living Tracklist. 50 tracks that shape the culture from 6 decades of hip-hop. Scan the QR code on a Sprite or Sprite Zero Sugar to see the full breakdown. Obey your thirst. Sprite.
Why do you think that the media keeps pushing these polls, these terrible poll numbers? And what do you think that they're actually trying to accomplish by constantly telling the American people that your numbers are underwater?
Well, they're trying to take spirit away from people. But the people know. And I have polls, and the polls are great. If I ran right now, I beat everybody by many points, many points. Now, the law precludes me from doing it, unfortunately.
Welcome to Quiet Riot, a Cooler Heads podcast that promises to boldly go where everyone has gone before, but with facts and empathy. I'm Andreou.
And I'm Naomi Smith, here to provide a bit of Vulcan reason so that we may all live long and prosper.
All while finding ways for you to engage and make it so.
So settle into the captain's chair, number 1, and prepare for another Quiet Riot.
Quiet Riot. Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm Alex.
And I'm Naomi.
And I'm Kenny.
This week, as Iran continues to humiliate America, I talked to Arthur Snell, host of our sister show Behind the Lines, to discuss how a forever war might impact the Middle East, the global economy, and Trump's midterm prospects. It's a cracker of a session.
And on Friday, we'll be bringing you Quiet Riot B-Side with the founder of a brand new magazine, Paperweight, whose mission is a refusal to accept that life can't just be quite a bit nicer again.
What a lovely idea. Now, on Sunday, we asked you about all the things that could be fixed in your local area or indeed further afield for very little cost. And you have delivered. Oh, have you delivered? We've been inundated with suggestions. So instead of our regular features this week, we're going to be reading out some of the better and indeed the battier ones.
Quiet Riot. Watching the escalating US conflict with Iran for the last couple of years, one would be forgiven for thinking there is a Benjamin Button quality to it. Like a Christopher Nolan film in which the timeline has been scrambled, the US went to military action first, then tried to get allies to approve it, then economic sanctions, then tried to get the world to join in, all to get to a deal which it had already with Iran before any of this started. Less than a week after taking office in February of 2025, Trump announced Operation Maximum Economic Pressure. Only it turned out not to be maximum because his Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent followed this in April of this year with Operation Economic Fury. A month later, he was at the G7 meeting trying to encourage other global powers to be as furious as he was. Now he has announced Operation Economic Outcast. Let's have a listen.
Today, at President Trump's direction, the United States Treasury has begun Operation Economic Outcast, an unprecedented campaign against the Islamic Republic of Iran and its enablers. In the Second World War, D-Day marked the historic beginning of a campaign with our allies to target and drive the enemy from its positions, including those in third countries. Today, in that same spirit, we are launching an economic onslaught against Iran's financial connections around the globe.
You described this as an economic D-Day, but D-Day wasn't a threat of an invasion, and the U.S. didn't give a timeline to Germany. So why not impose the sanctions today?
Well, we believe that it is important to level set and give people a cure period, but they should know that that will move very quickly and that we are serious. The reason we are able to use secondary sanctions is because we do not take their use lightly. So we believe that a warning shot and a level set of expectations is appropriate, We are giving everyone the opportunity to remedy bad behavior. Why would I want to blow up the global financial system?
Most think this is America's way of trying to force the rest of the world to join in by threatening secondary sanctions, like tariffs. But in an environment where tariffs are flung around by Trump arbitrarily, see the latest spat with Canada as an example, and the person who is most desperate for a deal, looking at Republican prospects in the midterms, is arguably Trump. Is anyone listening? Or is America really the country that is headed for economic outcast status? I'm joined by Arthur Snell, creator and presenter of our sister podcast, Behind the Lines. Hello, Arthur. Thanks for joining me during still just about your summer hiatus, isn't it?
Just about, although actually Behind the Lines will be back on air from next Tuesday, the 1st of September.
Oh, brilliant. I'll get details of that at the end of our chat. Arthur, can we pull back for a moment and let me ask this? Is there any way to interpret this other than abject military humiliation? I mean, are there any historic examples of a military operation de-escalating to economic sanctions being a sign of strength rather than the other way around?
I can't think of any. If I say there aren't, I'm sure one of our extremely well-informed listeners might contact us with a brilliant historical example, and I encourage that.
But it's not the way it usually goes, is it?
No, it isn't. You start with the economic pressure, you build that up, and then if in extremis, if that doesn't work, you fall back on military options. But as you noted there in your introduction, Alex, this isn't even economic warfare. As you know, D-Day was an attack, was an invasion of Europe. This is Scott Bessent threatening as a warning shot. So in fact, all they're doing is really a bit like Trump, making announcements which don't have any basis behind them.
Yeah, trailing an announcement of economic sanctions effectively. But just before Bessent's announcement, actually, the United Arab Emirates cut off trade with Iran. Now, most people at that point assumed it was because of repeated missile attacks, some stray, some deliberate. But maybe it was because they had advanced knowledge of this coming up. The UAE is the biggest supplier of goods to Iran. So will this hit Tehran quite hard?
I've got to say that is a more realistic and sort of clear and present danger to the Iranian economy. And one of the strange ironies of this very confused situation around Iran is the fact that in spite of apparent enmity between the Gulf Arabs and the UAE, perhaps at the head of that pack, anyone who knows Abu Dhabi and Dubai will know that a huge amount of Iranian money, and in fact Iranian oil, is sold through and shipped through the Emirates, some of it on a kind of grey market or all kinds of slightly dubious transactions. And so if it is what it says it is, it's a fairly major escalation by the UAE. But again, one wonders whether it's an announcement more than it's an actual implemented policy.
I mean, whichever way you cut it, really economic sanctions are a team sport. Have we had any indication on whether countries like China or Russia are interested in joining in?
I think we can assume they're absolutely not interested in joining in. And ultimately, what Scott Bessent's plan is, or the threat, is an operation that puts the most severe financial penalties against institutions in places like China and India, banks and so on, basically cutting them off from the US-led financial system, the dollar system. And in the sense of does the US have the weapons and does it have the ability? Yes, it could do that. And it could impose very significant costs on the Chinese economy. But what's rather interesting is, of course, Scott Bessent himself, when he was asked about this, he kind of gave away his own concerns. He said, why would I want to blow up the global financial system? Well, why indeed, Scott Bessent? And I think you do have this issue here where, on the one hand, obviously, you have the Americans humiliated militarily, and particularly Trump himself. He's someone who can't deal with that. So he's desperate for some kind of retaliation. But at the same time, of course, he is probably one of the most economically focused US presidents. He's desperate for good economic numbers that he can wave in front of the American population. And at the moment, he's got the opposite of that. So they're going to be super nervous about destabilizing the global financial system at a time like this.
Yeah, and I mean, considering there's always a lag in these things, you're kind of running out of runway as well to make this go away so that it actually begins to have an effect before the midterms? Can I ask you something else? Because you've spent time in that region. Do people overestimate Iran's reliance on oil? It seems to me that the West sees Iran as a country that depends entirely on oil, but it is actually under 10% of its GDP. And for everything else, which includes, for instance, huge agricultural produce, there are still viable trade routes to the north and the east via the Caspian Sea and extensive railway networks that go through, I think, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan and places like that, and connected to Russia and China. So is oil actually as big a deal for Iran as the West seems to think it is?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think it's hard to answer because quite often one might measure the specific role of oil within the economy and come with a fairly small number. But then what's hard to capture is all the sort of knock-on benefits, oil-related activities, effective subsidies that come out of the fact that people pay almost nothing for fuel. So, there are all kinds of elements there. But I think what people definitely underestimate is the capacity of the Iranian people to suffer and the capacity of the Iranian government to impose suffering on its people. And in a way, that's the point about sanctions, isn't it? That sanctions tend to be imposed by wealthy countries where people, ring up the police if KFC has run out of chicken thighs, on countries that have lived through warfare, insurrection, maybe, famine, shortages, natural disasters. And I think there's a sort of idea that, this will really get the Iranians up on the streets. Well, let us not forget that, of course, 30,000 Iranians were killed on the streets in January when Donald Trump told them, untruthfully, that help was on its way. And I don't think there is very much that's going to get the Iranians on the streets because a lot of them are dead. And the ones that aren't are keeping their heads down, not least because, again, thanks to Donald Trump, there's an even more hardline administration in place now than there was previously.
There have been images of some protests in Tehran in recent days, and apparently they are connected to shortages and things like that, but actually fairly polite and not very well attended.
Yes. Iran is a brutal authoritarian state, but it's not a totalitarian state. So there will be places where small numbers of people may sort of wave placards and they're probably very careful that they don't let it escalate and they know the risks to themselves.
Down with this sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, the other thing to recall is that, most of the population does not live in Tehran. And it's a classic case of where the people that we see projected back to us in media, and of course, it's a very hard place for international media to operate, are probably not reflective of the wider population.
Quiet Riot. Bonjour, compadre. It's the Priceline Negotiator. How do I negotiate so many great travel deals? My greatest gadget, the Priceline app. It's got hotel deals, flight deals, rental car deals, all of those deals in a bundle. Deals, game day deals, concert trip deals. No one deals more deals than Priceline. Hold your horses, there's more. The app lets you filter hotels by neighborhood, vibe, star level, and amenities like pools and spas and beachfronts and... Wait, I'm not done. Stop cutting me off. Priceline!
Quiet Riot. There was also an unscheduled visit by the top person in the CIA, the US intelligence service, traveled to Russia for unscheduled talks recently. What's that about? Is that related to this, or is it primarily about Ukraine? Because again, Russia is being hit quite hard at the moment.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Yeah, so John Ratcliffe made this visit unannounced. And as far as I understand, it was only really reported out because Russians noticed this sort of motorcade of American vehicles whizzing through Moscow and thought, oh, hang on a minute, something interesting is happening. So they were trying to keep it on the down low. We have to acknowledge from the outset that this is about speculation. We don't know. We don't know what was discussed. And, no minutes will be published. But the most convincing theory that I've come across is that in response to what has been a wide array of reports from fairly credible sources that Putin is planning some kind of direct escalation against NATO, not Ukraine, but NATO. The CIA director may have gone there to try to sort of talk Putin down. So we've had, I think the Lithuanian intelligence services have talked about it, the Estonians, there's been other reporting from other Nordic nations. there's been a little bit of a sort of consensus building up that Putin may be planning to do something to try to sort of destabilize NATO, presumably at a time when he sees a lot of division. Obviously, Trump has got his eye on other balls. And of course, you've got a lot of anxiety within European countries around both economic and security questions. So it might well be that Ratcliffe went there to look Putin in the eye and say, you really shouldn't do this. Now, of course, the problem with that is that if I'm Vladimir Putin, I nod along and smile and think, well, let's see what Donald Trump says. It's a big discussion to be had about Donald Trump's relationship with Russia and with Putin. But I think the one thing we do know is that whenever Putin gets on the phone to him, Trump seems to think it's been a wonderful conversation and they've agreed about a lot of things. So I think a stern warning from the head of the CIA has slightly limited utility in this current environment.
I guess so. But that kind of visit is quite unusual. At the same time, it is quite notable.
Yeah. There was a precedent just before the start of the Ukraine war. The CIA director under Biden, Bill Burns, went, and who knows what the impact was. I mean, obviously, Putin still launched an invasion of Ukraine, but maybe he thought twice about it. Maybe he de-escalated the use of certain threats or whatever. So, these things are unusual, and it means you don't do that just to catch up. It means that they're very concerned about something.
I wasn't going to ask you about this, but as you've brought it up, there's been quite a lot of threats towards the UK recently as well, because of its decision to expand its cooperation with Kyiv in some, I think, esoteric but quite significant ways, like Ukraine placing the core of its AI operations in the UK is a big, big thing. As far as I know, that particular operation is the main tool for identifying targets at the moment. And in exchange, the UK helping Ukraine with slightly longer range missile design. And there's been a reaction from the Kremlin. And I'm not sure to what extent this is the thing that we always get from the Kremlin, where it goes, anyone who joins our enemies will pay, or whether there is something more to that. And if there is something more to that, then what could it be? What are they talking about when they're saying that we will punish the UK?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think one thing it's worth noting, because, I mean, among listeners to our podcast, we are quite fed up of the sort of Boris Johnson boosterism, world-leading, world-beating, all that stuff. But I think when it comes to support to Ukraine, very few countries are as forward-leaning as we are, both in terms of resources we're willing to put to play, but also the extent of those. And yes, as you mentioned, Andy Burnham makes his first visit there, and he takes with him effectively the sort of green light to use a sophisticated targeting system. Now, of course, it's part of a joint project with France and others, so it's hardly as if this is a unilateral British effort, but it's important and significant. So yes, Russia will have us in its sights as one of the sort of, in its view, worst offenders. And of course, Russia has a long-term antagonistic relationship with this country, partly because of our transatlantic relationships, partly all the way back into imperial days and so on. Having said all of that, I'm still a bit skeptical. The problem with Russia is that they do, well, particularly the Kremlin and its media mouthpieces threaten nuclear obliteration all too often. So it's hard to know exactly what they mean. But then this takes us back to John Ratcliffe. If there are credible intelligence reports, perhaps pointing to some plan, not to invade or to, launch nukes, but there are all kinds of things that we can imagine. And let's just recall that just the other day, a drone was found at a German commercial airport which had explosives on it. So there's an escalation going on, which is really quite extreme. One can imagine that there may be other, ideas in the pipeline. So in that sense, we have to tread this line between complacency of saying, well, it's only Russia and they're always threatening this, to actually looking at what they're already doing and thinking, well, they might do more of this.
In a way, are we looking at the Iran situation through the wrong lens? Trump loves tariffs anyway, and he has been a little bit hamstrung from imposing them as liberally as he wants by needing either legislative or judicial approval after a certain time period. So is this maybe his way of imposing tariffs on whoever he wants by claiming they are an executive measure, by claiming China is collaborating with Iran, and that gives him the liberty to slap 50% on them?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I mean, Trump clearly believes, I think we have to assume that he actually believes that tariffs work, they provide results that he wants and also provide him with revenue. Although, of course, his beloved Supreme Court, most of whose justices he's either appointed or have been appointed by, fellow travelers, actually, they let him down on tariffs almost more than any other subject imaginable. So in that sense, it's hard to understand where that belief comes from. I think there is something about how we know from his first term, I think it's still true that he doesn't really like war. He finds war to be very expensive. And after all, the Iran war is a good example of something where he thought it would all be great. And it's dragged on forever. He hasn't got what he wants. He's actually gone backwards because of the Strait of Hormuz question. Whereas I suppose he thinks, I'm sure he's wrong, but he thinks he understands economics. He thinks he understands deals. He thinks he understands how to manipulate and sort of, make ultimatums and all that in that particular context. And perhaps he's going back to his comfort zone, and that reflects Scott Bessent sort of talking about this great D-Day. But as you said in your introduction, Alex, this is only the third economic war against Iran. And we have to assume that the first two didn't work because we're on the third one.
The third one, I was actually looking at a website, Arthur, that details all the economic sanctions that have been placed on Iran by America since 1979, and got carpal tunnel from scrolling down the page. They have been happening in their dozen every year since 1979. Have you kept abreast at all with the Canadian situation? Because that may well be the practical test, actually, I think, of America's resolve on tariffs. What happened was J.D. Vance was basically caught on a hot mic, saying that Mark Carney is a very sweet guy, but he puffs his chest out and says, I'm going to be tough with Donald Trump, and that he described him as hilarious. And that was the weekend that the main negotiation was meant to happen between Canada and America to resolve the tariff situation between them. And the Canadian officials quite literally packed up and went home.
Yeah.
They terminated negotiations over a new trade agreement. So there's now the renewed threat of tariffs, and Canada is saying, we're going to match you dollar for dollar. Anything you put tariffs on, we will put identical tariffs on something of equal value to you.
Yeah.
In a way, looking at the electoral cycle, Carney doesn't have a major electoral event coming up in Canada for a couple of years.
No.
Trump has a big test coming up in November. An escalating situation with Canada is probably the thing that could have the most immediate impact on inflation in the United States. So are we about to see that concept of financial might being tested to its limits, do you think?
Well, I think we are. And, I have followed this. And what's very interesting is, of course, Mark Carney is in contrast to plenty of other Western leaders. I think he knows that Trump respects strength. Obviously, the Canadian economy, more than any other economy on planet Earth, is very, very interlaced with the US economy. So he knows he's taking a risk. But actually, what I heard today was that a quick poll in Canada sees 76% of Canadians in support of Carney's response, which is, you don't get 76% for anything these days. So that's pretty interesting. And then going back to your point, Alex, on the other side of the border, in places, and I know we want to talk a bit about this, but places that really matter in the midterms, like Maine, like Michigan, like Ohio, places whose economies are, in the northern belt of the United States, lots of integration with Canada. These are places where Trump needs to win elections in just a few months' time, and I'm not sure he's going about it the right way.
Quiet Riot. The award-winning American Airlines Advantage program rewards more than travel. It takes your whole life to new heights. Earn miles when you fly, as well as with thousands of your favorite brands. And then redeem those miles for flights, upgrades, and experiences worldwide. Advantage members also enjoy earlier boarding and free high-speed Wi-Fi in flight. Join for free and start earning towards your next adventure at aa.com/Spotify. Quiet Riot.
I know you've been looking at the midterms, so perhaps we should talk a bit about that.
What's interesting is the movement, as always with those things. So not the absolutes, but which way the whole thing is heading. And I think it's really interesting that quite respectable forecasters, including the Cook political report, which is considered quite nonpartisan, they're all now shifting to a very slight advantage for the Democrats in taking control of the Senate.
Well, Mika, my expert analysis on that polling is it's real bad. None of this is working for the president right now. That's why we have Republicans really worried about this November. Many privately concede the House all but gone. The Senate feels like a true toss-up when a year ago at this time, we would have said Republicans were heavily favored to keep at least the upper chamber. The tariffs have been unpopular, and now we're at a renewed trade war with Canada. The Iran war, deeply unpopular, never sold by the president to the American people. All it has done is send prices soaring, particularly at the gas pump. And they've settled into a plan of economic pressure. Maybe that will work. But even if this does work, it's probably going to be a long time, too late to save Republicans, perhaps, for this midterms. And we're seeing, of course, as we'll get into it a little bit later, even the president's efforts to try to lower beef prices. A lot of Republicans pushing back. None of this is working right now. And the president, largely detached from a lot of this, seems to be focused solely on legacy, whether that's presiding over a number of America 250 events, including the Formula One race over the weekend. He's focused on things where he's trying to reshape physically Washington, D.C. And we saw the celebrations out of the White House because of the Supreme Court ruling at the end of last week that they could keep building the ballroom. And I even thought to myself, like, okay, that's the first, quote, good news headline that President Trump has received in a while. And yet even that good news headline for him is not good for the American people. We see polling that this just reinforces the idea that the public is like, well, wait, he's out of touch. He only cares about what he cares about, not what actually impacts our lives.
Yeah, the ballroom is not a political victory for Donald Trump. Every day the ballroom is in the news is a bad day for Trump. This is not something the American people really want at all. When you're running through that, the thing that just strikes me when you're running through all of the events that have occurred that are dragging down his approval rating, it strikes me how just intentionally self-inflicted all of this damage is. He comes into office, he inherits a border that was the American people were ready for him to close. He inherits an improving economy, and he inherits a declining inflation rate. He inherits declining crime rates. He was set for really smooth sailing for the next year, the next 2 years. And then he has provoked trade wars. He has initiated an actual war in the Middle East. You're beginning to get a sense that the world itself is spiraling out of control. You have expanding conflicts in Europe. The conflicts in Europe and Iran are starting to merge in some ways. And then this trade, every new headline, it's a new self-inflicted wound. This trade war with Canada due to remarkable overreach in trade negotiations. It is sinking into the American people that this is self-inflicted. None of this is necessary. None of this is for them.
I can't tell you how much of an impossibility this was 2 years ago. This cycle of midterms was seen as one where if things went very badly for Trump, the Democrats might possibly take control of the House of Representatives, the lower house in Congress. But the Senate was seen as a complete impossibility because they have 47 seats. Remember, flipping 3 seats is not enough for them because that means it's then 50-50, which gives J.D. Vance the casting vote. And so they would need to flip 4 seats, and that was seen as impossible. Fast forward to a few months ago, and the Democrats started seeing a likely path to 51 seats that basically went through Maine, Ohio, Alaska, of all places, and North Carolina. And now, because a lot of things are shifting, like suddenly Texas and Iowa are toss-up states or even leaning Democrat in some analyses. Suddenly they have 3 or 4 paths to that 51 number. It's difficult just to fathom if, for instance, Texas falls. The Senate race in Texas goes Democrat. I mean, that would, I think, signal a real blue wave across America. And it would mean that they would probably end up capturing quite a safe majority in the House of Representatives and a slight majority in the Senate. And then you take all of that and you match it to the general polling, okay, which has Trump at his lowest ebb he's ever had. I mean, his rating of approval at the moment is 31%. So really, that's not even his base quite.
Yeah.
And within that, even more interesting, because people tend to group together strongly approve and slightly approve. Within that, his strongly approve rating has collapsed to only 15%, while the strongly disapprove segment of the population is nearing 40%.
Wow.
I mean, that is a massive imbalance. Then you look at more specific stuff, for instance, on Iran, right? And I have here a poll, an A-rated poll in front of me. I should say that because, as you know, polling in the States is a little bit of a Wild West situation. And so they ask, do you think Donald Trump's military policies have worsened economic conditions in the country or improved them? And the public break 66 to 22.
Wow.
Do you think Donald Trump's decisions about military action in Iran have hurt the US or helped the US? 67 to 21. And so you look at that, and like I said, under the bonnet, his ratings are even softer than that.
Yeah.
The Democrats at the moment are quite unpopular as a party. I mean, that's in many ways, that's the conundrum, that people don't particularly love the Democrats.
No.
And they're still now on a between 8 and 11% lead nationally on general voting intention. And they're leading in the turnout. So if you look at the turnout in primaries, which is often quite a good predictor of whether people will turn out to vote in the midterm election, the turnout for Democrats in primaries in 20 states is up 40% from 2022. In contrast, the turnout for Republican primaries is down 6% for 2022. If you take that huge imbalance and then you look at the obvious motivation for the Democratic base to come out and vote, and I think it spells real trouble for Trump. And I wanted to ask you, let's envisage a scenario where Trump is really hobbled by the midterms and ends up with really Congress as a whole launching investigations on him and denying him the power to do X and denying him the budget to do Y. What happens then in places like Iran? How does that reflect in war theaters like Iran or Ukraine?
Yeah. Well, it's a very interesting question because it seems to me that most people expect that he loses the House. And in a way, Trump will be able to perhaps explain it away or criticize the candidates, many of whom, of course, he's handpicked. But anyway, if he loses the Senate, there's no hiding that is an absolute disaster. And if he loses the Senate in places like North Carolina, Texas, can you believe, Iowa, Alaska, these are super red states. Then obviously it just gets basically impossible for people to stand up and say, oh, this guy is brilliant and he's the best president we've ever had and, the economy is going great guns. It is very obvious that he has those problems.
But then, Arthur, they can't do the opposite as well because the strange pincer movement is that if they don't criticize Trump, they get punished by voters. If they criticize Trump, he eliminates them at the primary.
Right. Yes. So they're stuck in this bizarre and sort of ridiculous, cul-de-sac. But what I was going to say is that, then of course, everybody quite rightly will be licking their wounds in the aftermath of what Barack Obama called a shellacking and saying, okay, so then what are the reasons for this? And then we will go back to the Iran war and the massive failure, the humiliation, the fact that gas prices are going up. Because Trump has refused to allow reality to seep into the discussion, in a way, he's made it harder for him to come up with excuses or other reasons why this situation is unfolding. And I think he's going to have real trouble. And of course, we all thought that after leading an insurrection, that ought to be enough to get the Republicans to discard Trump. Well, it wasn't. And that tells you all you need to know about the modern Republican Party. But there is a point that when he is a proper lame duck who's managed to lose both the House and the Senate, if that happens, I mean, that is the lamest of lame ducks. And I just don't see how he comes back from that. And then you will start to see Republicans, even the spineless ones that we've got sort of used to seeing, I would think they're going to have to come out of the woodwork because that's when it becomes existential for their own careers.
Yeah. Of course, the possibility that none of us will even want to entertain is that you find some kind of excuse to cancel the midterms.
Yes, and obviously that sadly, the more it looks like the Democrats could take the clean sweep, and particularly the Senate, he will start playing around. And I think the places where you've got a real problem is where because of course elections are run by states, is where the state administration is very red, and obviously
like
Texas. Yeah, and that seems to be that's a real risk, because if Tallarico, this young Democrat who's polling very well, looks like he's going to take Texas, that would be so humiliating. Everybody knows that Texas is a Republican state, and if that's about to happen, you can imagine Trump trying to rig it.
Excluding that very extreme possibility, really, Trump needs a way out of the Iran situation, and really in the next couple of weeks. So, Arthur, I return at the end of this session to the same question I have asked you every time we've discussed this. What is the off-ramp? Are we now in the territory where all that's left for him to do is to go to Iran, give them everything they're asking for, and then somehow claim it in a PR way as a victory?
I think if you had a rational president, there would be something where you do that and you package it in such a way that you can make some claim, albeit rather absurd, but you make a claim that this was what you always meant to do, and this is brilliant, and here's why the Americans are doing so well from this, and haven't we all, aren't I brilliant? I think the problem with Trump is that he actually lacks the mental capacity, maybe partly to do with his age, but partly just from his character, to be able to think through that slightly difficult dance. And of course, how many times has he announced, we've taken the Straits of Hormuz, it's now US territory, or, there's all this kind of nonsense.
He's now claiming that they've cleared all the mines. Is that a credible claim?
I'm not going to claim I'm a mine clearance expert, but I mean, none of this seems credible. And so it seems to me that there's almost nothing he can do, even if he said, I'm turning this whole thing over to proper diplomats with experience who've negotiated with Iran for decades, all the people that he fired because he thinks they might not be MAGA. I don't think he can fix this now, because he doesn't know how to say yes or no to a thing that could be a solution for him. If it were anyone else, it would be a tragedy. In this case, it's hubris or nemesis.
Yeah, he's had the opportunity several times to take something that he could present as a sort of victory, and he always backtracks and goes, no, we'll smash them, I'm sure.
Yeah.
News of Behind the Lines coming back from next week?
Absolutely. Had a bit of a summer break. Apologies to anyone who missed me. We've all got to breathe now and then. But I've got some really interesting things coming up. I'm talking to Akansha Narain, who is an expert on Indian politics, about the fascinating cockroach movement. If people haven't followed that, this is one of the kind of Gen Z kind of revolutionary movements that really caused Narendra Modi to do something he very rarely does, which is a climb down. So we've got that. We've got some stuff about how AI is changing the way wars are being fought, and the implications of all of that, and the way also in which, of course, AI is accessible to the bad guys as well. So the increasing use of AI by sort of militants, terrorist groups, and so on. And then finally, something a little bit different, but I'm excited to share, which is I interviewed somebody from Trinidad, a country, of course, I used to live in, about the way that the UK immigration policy changes, the impact that's having on ordinary people who are solid professionals, people who've got a perfectly decent record, who are being denied entry to our own country, and the impact that it has on their lives. So much more of a personal story, but something I found very illuminating.
And I think from a region of the world that has a long tradition in nursing and social care and professionals
and made a huge contribution to our society, and one where, of course, we have all kinds of historical legacies.
And since I am in the privileged position of being able to register a request, maybe now that the peak of the crisis, as it were, has died down a little bit, we saw in Ceuta, if you could get an expert to talk about the politics and Morocco's rivalry with Algeria, and Spain turning more towards Algeria, and how Morocco is vexed about that. I'm sure you have the right contacts to find someone.
Very good suggestion.
Okay, Arthur, absolute pleasure as always to talk through this stuff with you, and I look forward to you coming back. And then we can have you in the studio proper in a couple of months and we can chat through everything.
It would be my pleasure. Thanks, Alex.
Quiet Riot. When it's time to scale your business, it's time for Shopify. Get everything you need to grow the way you want. Like, all the way. Stack more sales with the best converting checkout on the planet. Track your cha-chings from every channel, right in one spot. And turn real-time reporting into big-time opportunities. Take your business to a whole new level. Switch to Shopify. Start your free trial today.
This podcast is brought to you by Versed. Guys wear that guys wear. This fantasy football draft season, Verse Limitless pants should be at the top of every guy's watch list. Because while some guys are sweating whether to risk it all on an up-and-coming rookie, fall back on a trusted vet, or to just ride with whatever the auto draft tosses at them, gearing up with the Limitless Collection's versatility, comfort, and style is always a sure thing. Versed. Guys wear that guys wear. Only at Dick's.
Quiet Riot.
Genuinely fabulous news there on those upcoming Behind the Lines episodes. And as an extra call to action today, why don't you go over and subscribe to Arthur's podcast on whatever platform you favour? And remember to choose the option of automatically downloading new episodes as well, because it does make things an awful lot easier. Now, there ain't no wokey dokey or even a God bless America this week. Instead, we asked you, and you delivered. Today, and in tomorrow's show as well, we're going to read out some of the best responses to our call for petty but brilliant ideas that would rapidly transform your local area at next to no cost. Alex, deep breath, kick us off.
Right, so this is listener Melissa by email. She writes, combining your Friday and Sunday shows, the cheapest solution that would make the UK infinitely better, allowing tenants to paint walls and hang things on the walls. Doesn't cost the council a cent, could enforce council tenants making things right on moving out, and tenants feel like they actually can live in their homes, thus feel more grounded in their community. Signed, a person who spent 12 years renting with children in 5 different flats. I could not agree more. I mean, obviously, you do have to make things right on moving out, but actually, a bit of polyfiller and a coat of paint is not the most expensive thing in the world, and it really does make a huge amount of difference. And I would actually urge private landlords to allow likewise, because what you want is stable long-term tenants. What you don't want is to be looking for a new tenant every 6 or 12 months, because then your flat is empty, and you lose rent. So what you want is people who feel that that's their home, and allowing people to paint the walls in a color of their choosing and put up a couple of pictures is not the most unreasonable thing, is it?
I think most private landlords do allow that kind of thing now. And they'd be mad not to. And I completely agree. You've got to make people proud of the home they live in and want to be proud of it. They'll look after it as long as you hold up your side of the bargain and deal with issues that they can't fix, like the roof or the guttering or whatever. Then surely society just becomes so much more reinforcing of one another and mutually beneficial.
Naomi, I have been thinking about the story you highlighted on Sunday about the welcome mat.
Yeah.
I was so annoyed about it, and then I was walking actually just behind my house past the big council estate, and something occurred to me, and it goes to exactly what I was saying to you, that the problem is the rule has become detangled from the policy. Because I looked at that set of flats, and actually the sort of shared balcony corridor outside all the doors is also the fire escape for the floor above. And so I can understand why there is a rule and they enforce it. But they should make that clear to the tenant. The reason you can't put things outside your door is because we don't want people running in case of a fire alarm to be tripping over welcome mats. The moment you make that clear to someone, I think it becomes an entirely reasonable thing, and you don't feel targeted in the way your friend did,
Yep.
Anyway, which one have you chosen, Naomi?
Well, also on email from Robert. Thank you, Robert. He is talking about Aberystwyth. So here we go. On Aberystwyth Promenade, well known for being beautiful, picture postcard, etc., the showpiece hotel is, or at least was, the Bellevue Royal. It was the only place where you could sit at a table in any weather and eat a civilized meal while looking out to the sea. In 2018, so yes, 8 years ago, it was the victim of fire damage, and that is a whole other story. So, Robert, you will have to fill us in on that. And it has been an eyesore ever since. He's attached a picture. It's looking very run down, boarded up, windows with kind of MDF stuck on behind them, etc. And he said the owner is playing games with the planning bunnies. Robert rightly concludes, come on, we're supposed to be a tourist town. And the Bellevue Royal is in pole position and should be a jewel in the crown.
Yeah.
So much of your own sense of pride in an area is demolished when you look around and see that no one else cares about it. And
Yeah.
very visible signs of decline make you feel that no one cares, no one's investing in you or your community, that this is kind of managed decline. And the more that we can, plant plants and trees and paint walls of, otherwise decrepit areas to breathe a little bit of light and love and humor back into them, the better, I think. So, yeah.
Particularly with buildings like that are real focal points, because they set the tone for an area, don't they? It's not just big hotels as well. Actually, in Topsham, where I'm usually to be found, there is a building on 4th Street, which is the high street, which greets you as you come into the heart of Topsham. It used to be a NatWest bank, and it's a sort of 3-story building. And there ain't a bank in Topsham now, and most of the bank buildings have gone and they're now shops or whatever. But the old NatWest building is still empty, and it's started to become a little bit derelict, to the point that my other half was part of a group of people who started a campaign called the NatWest Action Group, NAG, to try to get the owner of the bank, of the old bank, to try and scrub it up a little bit. And it's been a couple of years, but actually, finally, things are happening. The posters are coming down, the windows are a little bit cleaner, and it's amazing how little work is actually required.
It shouldn't take 2 frigging years, should it?
It shouldn't.
Let's be honest. It should be part of your responsibility as a commercial tenant to never leave the place in a state of disrepair. It should be a clause in your contract. Anyway, what have you chosen, Kenny?
I've got one from Ian Robbo on Blue Sky. Hello, Ian. Nice to hear from you again. Ian says, first of all, he's got 3 suggestions. Number 1, I'm with Alex. Ban all noise from tailpipes on cars or bikes above a certain level. I don't need to know that you've got a small dick.
The sound of a tiny penis accelerating down the road.
Then point 2 kind of links to that. Ian just says simply, ban fireworks.
Dogs up and down the country howling in agreement.
Yeah, dogs, people that work night shifts as well. And I dare say we still allow some of them, just, council firework displays and things like that.
I've just come back from Ireland, and obviously I grew up in Northern Ireland, and fireworks, for very obvious reasons, are banned there for individual purchase. You can only go to organised fireworks.
Fun explosives, eh? I don't think there's a place for fun explosives in people's kitchen drawers or wherever the hell they hide the fireworks these days. It's just not a good idea. Those days are past. And then thirdly, Ian suggests, I assume he's talking about bins, because he says, make councils collect every week. We had a lot of maggots this summer, which makes me wonder if has he been stuck in Clacton or something?
Yeah, I similarly have a list from someone, Legal Claret on Blue Sky. He says, 1, a complete ban, punishable by death, for anyone playing music allowed on public transport. I agree with the sentiment, Legal Claret, but the punishment might go a little too far. 2, a ban on the issuing of parking fines by private companies. A ban on delivery companies saying, we called, but you were out when you weren't.
Oh, yes, hard agree.
They do that a lot. I think I would switch the death punishment to that, if I'm honest. I think music on public transport just deserves to be shamed rather than death. How about you, Naomi? You've got another one?
Yeah, Sid got in touch by commenting on our website. We do have a contact form on there, but he was calling me out. So his complaint was about me rather than something cheap that the council could do to improve his area, because he writes, I wish you would stop using, quote, golf club members as your go-to stereotypes for blinkered white Middle England populists. I am a member of a golf club for no reason other than I enjoy the game. Although I am white, many of my fellow members are not, and my political sympathies are broadly in line with those of your presenters. Hashtag not all golfers. Sid, I think you just might be the exception that proves the rule there. I will endeavour to come up with another analogy for my formerly UKIP, now Reform UK Faragists that dislike some of the members of the far-right political bloc that are trying to muscle in on their show.
I feel that the way you read that, Naomi, did not drip with respect for Sid's point.
The phrase poking the wasp's nest springs
You might
to
think
mind.
that. I couldn't possibly comment.
How about Kenny?
I've got one that I really like, actually. It's from Pete, who's also on Blue Sky. And Pete, he starts with some nice words, actually. He says, I can't thank you enough for a podcast produced with such remarkable insight, curiosity, and understanding. Hearing your trepidations in discussing Jason Arday's tragedy made me realise why I devour each podcast word by word. Thank you for all the work you do to create each show. I live in Tower Hamlets, and the rubbish bins, yeah, it's rubbish again. The rubbish bins in our streets have been disappearing at an alarming rate, and I've no idea why. Bins that have been in place for decades are just gone overnight, and they don't walk away by themselves. Perhaps the council thinks if there's no bins, then they don't have to pay someone to empty them.
Can I tell you that the bins in my area have been disappearing, and it's a really sore point. I think the council is removing them so they don't have to collect them.
Oh, Pete, you might have stumbled on something bigger here. Well, Pete's got some good news, because ever resourceful, the good people of Tower Hamlets haven't resorted to littering the streets. Instead, get this, people, they've commandeered the baskets on the swarms of Lime bikes as their new public rubbish bins. So there's millions of bikes over here, and each one with a very handy rubbish bin on the front. Rubbish that used to be collected by the council from public bins is now being cycled around East London for eternity. Cycling rather than recycling. It's priceless.
As a frequent cyclist on hire bikes, he is correct, and this is not confined to Tower Hamlets, I can confirm. The worst I had, because I try and check before I get on, but I'm always in a rush and I don't always, I just hop on and start cycling away. But the worst I've had, I was cycling, I think up Whitehall actually, and I began to smell something really revolting.
Oh,
I was like,
God.
Christ,
No,
Downing Street's
no,
got a
no.
bit of a plumbing problem. And then I realised somebody had vomited into the basket, and I was just cycling into the headwind, and there's fumes from the sick from the night before up into my face. And you can't dock a bike on Whitehall, so I could not, if I'd have been fined massively, and quite rightly so, if I'd leapt off it and parked it there. So I had to go on to the next kind of docking area to get away from it. So yeah. Got another one from your neck of the woods, actually, Kenny, not Topsom, but just down the road in Exeter. This was come in from Emma, also by email to quietriotpod@gmail.com. Seagull feeding.
Oh.
So Emma says, I know tourists and some locals find it cute, but it's really, really unhelpful. The same tourists and locals are always gutted when they lose their lunch to these creatures, who they, half an hour ago, were chucking bread to. As if a seagull can distinguish between food you want to give it and the bougie bagel you bought for yourself. Emma says, I'd love to see some seagull feeding klaxons installed along Exeter's quayside so that when you see someone feeding the seagulls, you can discreetly press it and it'll emit a large noise that disperses the birds and then lists to the feeders in the dulcet tones of Nigella Lawson or Mary Berry, as trusted national treasures, the reason why this isn't good for the birds or the locals that have to live with them, ruining outdoor eating all year round. She says, I'm unsure of the ethics of installing those, but you did ask for Petty, and indeed we did, Emma. Now, as long as the transmission of the noise wasn't so loud as to wake up neighbouring people, because that would annoy Alex, you see.
Yeah, because I was going to say, we would then get an email about the bloody klaxons.
Exactly. But my husband is from Exeter, and I said, oh, do you have a particular seagull problem in Exeter? And he said, yes, usually when it's stormy out at sea, then the seagulls come up the estuary and into Exeter. And that his friend's mum works at Marsh Barton Industrial Estate, where they have a very particular problem with seagulls. And he said, as a child, I was always fascinated because at the end of the day, she'd drive home and her car was covered in seagull poop.
It's funny, I don't remember the seagulls being particularly problematic at the quay. I'm probably more of a nuisance than the seagulls are, to be quite honest.
We don't doubt that.
We are thinking of installing a klaxon that we can press every time you're being annoying. Okay, then.
Can I tell you my favourite seagull story? Because it wasn't in Exeter that happened. It was in Monaco, all right, when I was living a different life and I had to go to Monaco for a meeting, as you do. And I was put up in a hotel with a swimming pool. And I got up in the morning and ordered breakfast, and I went to get my mobile phone and had my breakfast on the balcony, all ready to eat for the view of the swimming pool. And while I was picking up my phone, I was aware of a bit of a kerfuffle on the balcony. I turned around just in time to see a big flipping seagull making off with my sausage. And it swept away, and it squawked, and it dropped the sausage into the swimming pool where the sausage was bobbing up and down like a most unmentionable thing in the swimming pool. And curiously enough, the swimming pool was empty for the rest of the morning. God bless you, seagull. You cheered me up no end at all.
Well, thank you, listeners. I think that is enough for today. We're going to be back with more of them tomorrow, and our regular service resumes next week with the Old Faithfuls, including one corker of a wokey dokey. Quiet Riot. And that's your lot for this week's Thursday episode. Our huge thanks, as ever, to Arthur, and a very special thank you to everyone who has tuned in.
Don't forget our latest B-side episode is out tomorrow with the lovely Cal Roscoe, editor of a brand new online magazine called Paperweight, to discuss the rapidly changing media consumption habits of the young generation.
Now, before you go, please do make sure to head over to ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod and sign up for a $5 a month so that we can carry on bringing everyone fresh content at the same time every week, regardless of their ability to pay.
We love you more than Naomi loves Europe. Well, you know, you take my point.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production from Cooler Heads, written and produced by Andreou, Naomi Smith, and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta, artwork by Simona Canelu, and edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot. So settle into the captain's chair, number 1, and prepare for another Quiet Riot.
Did any of that make sense to you, Naomi?
Not really, but I kind of...
You don't really watch... Yeah, they're all Trekkie things.
I got that. I knew that much.
But you know, engage is a catchphrase and make it so is a catchphrase. And
I didn't,
number
but
one,
I got that from how you read it, not from how I...
Okay.
Yeah.
Kenny, are you a Trekkie?
I recognised every last one of the references from the original series, from the Jean-Luc Picard series, for the whole damn lot.
Okay.
Yes.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.